I'm Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and today we're joined by Lacey Grim. Lacey, thanks for making time.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Well, tell us all about you and why you do what you do.
Well, first, I'm loving what you're doing. I've listened to your podcast several times already and just got met you and introduced to it. And I just think what you're doing is brilliant. Women need this. I think we need to be more honest and open. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, no, I spend my life trying to be helpful and figure out how I can use my skills and talents in the most effective way to help and serve my community. And my husband and I have a homestead, and we raise four children on that homestead. And I think our goal in general is just to live life in a learning way. Life as a schoolhouse is our motto, and so we just try to make every experience a learning experience for us, and then open the community to participate with us.
So homesteading has become such a popular, I'm intrigued by it, right? You watch, shows, you read
Yeah.
books, you see like people Instagramming and building gardens and all kinds of things, and it's fascinating to me and I love it so much. Tell me how you got, have you always been a homesteader? How did you get on this path?
So it's really funny because there is certainly a huge spike in trend. And so it makes me feel like, oh, there's this great opportunity for us because we've been doing it since before it was so trendy. I think maybe we were just at the beginning, the front end of the curve. But we started homesteading. We bought our first house, had a garden that was facing south so we could garden, right? It was in our ingrained in us to want to work with the land. And so I think we got addicted with our first pot when we grew our first plant of tomatoes in our apartment when we were just newlyweds. And that was 20 years ago. So 23 years ago, something like that. I don't know. I try not to do the math every day, but yeah, so it just became this way of living where we were like, okay, why are we using this modern convenience? And what would change if we tried doing it on our own from scratch? Time after time, it proved to be a really um, interesting and also usually a like self-satisfying experience because we learned, oh, we can do things we didn't know we could do. That was cool.
Yeah, and what a crazy adventure. Able to learn everything and do everything. What was your kind of guidance going into that? Were you just reading books or how are you getting the education to be able to do what you're doing? And for
Oh
other
yeah,
people that are like, where do I even start?
right. It was well before there were whole like stations dedicated just to teaching people how to live this lifestyle for sure. So books, lots and lots of books. We read and read and read. And then, I'm really a trial by fire kind of girl. So we would just start it. I know we started keeping bees. And everybody's like, oh, you should take the master beekeeping class. And I was like, we'll just get some hives and see what happens. So that's what we did, right? And we had a really great experience with keeping bees and then, so on and so forth with gardening. I mean, there's always a great class option out there. But I know for myself, like it's just easier to dive in. I'm much more of a hands-on learner. So no amount of classroom experience is going to fill my cup in terms of really taking information and then applying it again in the future. So it's all like a dive in situation for us. Everything we do, we're like, oh, we want chickens. Well, let's go buy some. There's not like a research this first kind of a mentality. It's like we'll figure out the problems as we go.
So tell us about your homestead. What do you have on it? What does it look like for folks that obviously can't see it or can't be there? Like give us
Right.
a verbal tour.
Okay, a verbal tour. So we have our home. We bought it, we fixed it up a lot over the years. We tried to make it sort of a somewhat sustainable. So like right now when it's super cold, it's been cold for a few months. We have a wood stove and we actually own several properties, some that we use for rentals and things. And so watching the bills on the other houses, the electric bill is just like skyrocketing these last few months. But we have a wood stove that heats our whole house that we live in full time. So we haven't seen that bill go up as significantly. But anyway, so the house is somewhat, sustainable. We try to harness the gray water, we catch rainwater, and then we built our gardens around the house. So we really embrace a lot of the permaculture ideas, and we want our homestead to be sort of a living landscape, something that we interact with very regularly and without too much extra effort. So sometimes you'll see on farms where things are kind of compartmentalized, where there's the barn over there and the garden is out back and so on and so forth. Things are kind of gridded out. And we're really a little bit more of a free flowing, fluid, almost kind of a whimsical situation where there's paths kind of meandering, and we really want it to be something that you feel like you want to walk out into and sit down and have a cup of coffee and make it something that's like a living part, almost an outdoor living space more than anything. So while function is important, most of the perennials that we've planted, or most of the landscaping, is all perennial foods like blueberries and fig trees and things like that. And then we do have like an orchard space, and we have movable fences for all our livestock. So we move them around the property a lot, just to help spread their manure out and build nutrition in different areas. And, it's all been a huge learning experience, and we've been developing it since we moved in. We've been on this property for about 13 years. So, it never ends. There's always a long list of things to do and to try and to experiment with. But it's ever changing, ever morphing. Currently we have cows. That's the main animal we have. We always have some chickens. We have lots of dogs and cats, and but cows are really our thing right now. My husband is very experienced now in regenerative agriculture. So we have a few cows, dairy cows on our property that we milk, and then we have a property that we lease, and we run cattle on that for beef.
Wow, that's a lot going on. And I'm assuming this lifestyle encouraged you to launch your podcast as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, 2020, I think that was like the peak of everyone being like, I want a homestead, right? I'm at home all the time. What can I do while I'm here? And so we were like, oh, well, we know all this stuff. We can just start recording our conversations, and then people maybe will benefit from that. So that's definitely how the podcast began, for sure.
And how has that journey been?
The podcasting? Oh, we've loved it. It's given us this incredible opportunity to interview folks, to get to know other people in the community. And then, very regularly people, especially in our local region, will say, oh, we listen to your podcast. We just love it. And I just really appreciate that we're not wasting all this information that we've acquired through, trial and error over the years. It feels good to be able to share that in a way that's meaningful and helpful for other people who are on a similar journey.
Yeah, now you're the expert, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like expert it's a little bit of a farce, right? Like we're all just figuring it out.
That's true. We're all, yeah, learning every day for sure. Well, one thing we like to talk about here on the podcast is money memories, right? So, what's a money memory that you had as a younger person or as a child that helped mold your relationship to money now as an adult?
It's interesting. Since I've been listening to the podcast, I've been thinking like, what are they? And I've had a lot. There's a lot of things that stand out to me. I grew up in a very low income family. My father was a minister, actually. So, I maybe not all ministers, but our situation was low budget, right? And I remember never feeling like we didn't have a lot of money, but knowing we didn't, couldn't buy extra things and that kind of thing. So I think there's a little bit ingrained in me. My mom in particular, and my dad, they figured out how to get what they wanted and do what they wanted without the money, though. So I think I have it in me that the money is just, it's not really necessary to have a good life, right? Like I just don't feel like I have to have it. I feel like it's kind of one of those things that's nice to have, but ultimately we'll be okay without it. I think that's ultimately my very foundational experience and memory, is just this general feeling of we've got everything we need, and we'll figure out how to get what we want through other means, maybe not with money. But I do specifically remember wanting a bicycle when I was 12. And so I saved my money and was able to buy the bicycle. And then I remember when we went in to buy, I was so proud of myself for having saved. And my dad was really he's a cyclist, so he's been biking my whole life. And we went into the store to pay, and the bike that I found that he thought I should get was obviously a little outside of what I had saved. And he just made up the difference. And I was just shocked. I think I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I was just like, wait a minute, this is more than I had saved for. I'm getting more than I had expected out of the situation. So it's one of the better memories, I think, of, I worked hard and I did all this saving. And then, I don't know, I can kind of go either way, because I didn't maybe meet the goal myself entirely, but I did have that support of my father who wanted to help me get where I wanted to go. So, I don't know. That's interesting. That's the main memory that comes up when I think about the money that I saved and earned specifically. There you go.
That's a sweet memory and emotional too for you, right?
Yeah, I'm a crier, so I cry over everything. But yeah, I think just even going back into that moment is emotional because it was a good memory. It was a good experience. But yeah. I mean, I think it's hard not for money experiences not to be emotional. I've been trying to work on that a good amount through my adulthood. So I I think that's what your podcast is really all about. How do we uncover some of that?
Totally, and how to work through it, and do you change the narrative or does it still serve you? And I think it's
Right.
interesting with what you had said too, like fascinating, because you're sharing, money's there and can you do use it? Yes, of course, as a tool, but you can also do without, which is really hand in hand with what you're doing with homesteading,
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean,
like
and
big picture.
yeah, I think a lot of in the homesteading world, I think it's a lot of scrappy people who want to make something out of nothing, right? Like that's a really, I think, elemental thing that I don't know, the resourcefulness of it is I think for me sometimes I worry even that it affects how I am financially because I would rather figure out how to do it without the obvious answer, which is the money, right? That just feels like a tool of convenience. So yeah, that's really interesting to think about. But I think that a lot of people living this kind of lifestyle have that same feeling of like, well, I don't have to buy it, I'll just make it myself. Right.
Which is fascinating. I mean, and the best of both worlds, right? Potentially.
Potentially. Yeah. I think there's some good things and some pitfalls
With anything. With
with it.
anything.
Right.
So the other thing we talk about too is financial infidelities, which can be a very big word for a lot of people and meaning different things to each person as well. What's a
Mm.
financial infidelity, one or many, that you've experienced or that you've witnessed that you think others could learn from?
Well, okay, so I've had a successful business for the last, I don't know, decade, a little bit more than a decade, that I ran myself. Um, Before that, my husband had a business, and I did so well with my business, he was able to sell his, and then he came into my business and sort of took over all the books and the bookkeeping and the taxes, and just doing all the back end things that are really not what I love to do. Right? I was like, you focus on that, and then I can focus on the other. And it I think in a way crippled me in terms of how I feel about the finances of our business. He's done a great job. There's no complaints about his management, but it leaves me in a place where I feel I have to ask permission a lot of times, and it feels kind of backwards when all of those finances are a result of my work, and yet I still feel like I have to say, oh, do I have money for this, or can I use money for that, or it puts me in this really awkward position that can be very I don't know what the word is, like it handicaps me in a way, or demoralizes me, or just it makes me lose confidence. And I think that it's not something I love to do, but I think the more my hands are in our finances, the more I feel um, control is not the right word because I don't really ever feel completely in control. I've learned to be okay with that, but just maybe responsible. I feel more responsible and I feel more, I don't know, just capable, I think, um, of seeing it come in, seeing it go out, and helping manage how all that functions.
Now you bring up a really, I think, solid point because it's almost like more so of a partnership,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
interesting
Mhm.
because when you see, like for me, like when I have a new client that comes in, that's potentially a couple, they'll both come in, and sometimes they
Mhm.
don't, but I always encourage both of them to come in
Right. Yeah.
because I want both of them to be at the table and to have the discussion because there's always
Right.
one person that's a little bit more of the lead or maybe completely the lead in that financial conversation, that relationship too. But
Mhm.
again, terrible thing to think about, but this is like what I went through too. Like my grandparents, my grandpa was the guy. My grandma
Mhm.
was not the financial person. Could she do it? Of course. She was smart. She was great. Like, could she? But he was the guy. And that was a generational thing back in the day too.
Mhm.
But again, when he passed, then we found ourselves picking up pieces everywhere and they didn't have a lot, but what they had was spread around. So
Right.
being in a situation where you're not, communicating with your partner and whatever that looks like. I mean, I commend you for being like, no, no, we're both going to talk it through and I want my fingers in the pot and I want to be more responsible with it because that's huge because it's better to have that conversation now than
Mhm.
when you're, in a different moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that infidelity is just I think feeling like it wasn't my place to be. I don't think I really felt that way, but I think there was like a bit of a subconscious, oh, well, it would make more sense for him to take care of this stuff and me to just do the like the face of the business. So, yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. I'm sure it's layers deep. I'm sure it's been modeled, like generation to generation. I know that that's the story of my parents for the most part and back generation. So, I think, yeah, it's just about, I think I've always felt And this is something that I've seen, my parents do, and other wives and husbands, where the woman will have maybe a part-time job, or she'll have, side business that she does, and she keeps that money. And this is really how my job started. It was like, oh, my side business to pay for the things like outside of our regular budget. Um, and then it turned into something much larger than that. And it always was hard for me to shift into the, okay, but where's my like play money? Like, okay, but you've taken all of it and now I have to do something else So it's interesting how I feel like I see that again and again and again. And it's a pretty standard way for couples to interact, or at least it has been, and it's shifting. And I've had to sort of cling to, okay, no, 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 no. I'm not, this isn't my play money. This is my, and working at it from a different angle. It's just been hard to shift. But anyway.
Yeah, and I think again, another valid point is just communicating that too,
Yeah.
right? Like making sure that you are speaking your piece and saying your truth along the way of whatever that is to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think I've even learned just having this conversation, like, oh, that's where that comes from and why it landed there. So I think having, what I love about your podcast is it gives us this opportunity to hear other people's stories, and, think this money taboo topic that that in politics, right? Or religion, we're just not allowed to, that's not something we talk about. And, we've been pretty open and honest in raising our kids. I really want them to feel financially equipped, and to walk out the door knowing like, these are some good ways to behave, and these are some not so good ways to behave. And we have a 19-year-old, and she's figuring that out. She has a job and she works close to full time. And how she's managing that money is very interesting. And so it gives us this new opportunity to really learn side by side. But those are conversations, in high school, I don't remember having a real deep financial conversation with my folks. It was sort of like, okay, goodbye. Here's how a credit card works, you know,
And
and
good that
don't,
you I
yeah,
was gonna say good that you got at least that. Like a lot of us didn't even get here's how the
yes,
credit card works. And then you're in
yeah,
debt and you're like, what? Like what's
yeah,
happening here? But no,
yeah,
I
that's
feel like,
absolutely.
yeah, the conversation, I'm thankful that it's like less taboo now. But I feel like for me, it was just hearing these conversations over and over from clients. And they're like, oh, can I buy this? Or is this going to mess up my financial plan? And you see that they're savers and they've been doing the right things, but they think something, little that they're purchasing, buying, a car or a couch or whatever that is, right? Could
Mhm.
that be detrimental for them retiring and living a comfortable life based on, maybe a memory that they had as a young person growing up and families just trying to get food on the table? So there are
Right.
all these seeds that are planted that are so fascinating, but
Yeah.
everybody has a money memory, but
Yeah.
nobody really talks about it. So no, thank you for sharing yours and your financial infidelity of navigating through too.
Yeah. 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 No, well, thank you for having an opportunity to do that. Yeah.
So as we, start to wrap things up, the final thing I like to ask is what are tips and or tricks that you use to utilize money differently in your household?
I'll tell you, I am doing my best with money when I review our accounts every single week. So I really try to use Sunday as my day to review, and really just go through every single debit in our accounts, because there's, especially these days where there's so many recurring payments, so many subscriptions, so many bills that get paid automatically, and you never feel that money leave your hand. And so I really think it's important to, in that way, touch your money in one way or another, to not only see how much is going out, and that can be overwhelming, but also to see how much is coming in, and how much you're able to pay for, and how much, I think there's something really gratifying about saying these bills are pretty high, but I'm paying for it. I'm doing this. I have what it takes to live this life. So yeah, I think that's my one little thing. When I do that, I feel less like things are kind of spinning along and I don't know what's happening, good or bad.
No, I think that's a good one. And just empowering yourself to know what's happening in your financial picture. Cause a lot of people
Mhm.
are like, nope, no idea, running along, doing my thing. And what's happening financially over here, no clue. So you're not sticking your head in the sand. You're like really giving that time to
Yeah.
audit what's going on in your own world.
Right, and our grandparents, they always had and I remember my mom had a checkbook, right? And everything got ledgered
Yes.
out. And we don't do that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe people do that, but I don't do that. And why would I? Because, those things are getting sent out before I even realize. And so it's my way of kind of taking back, like, okay, what would my checkbook ledger look like if I had one? And maybe I should just have one. Maybe I should just be writing it down. I think if it comes and goes without your knowledge, and it's not really, um, I don't know, good or bad, I guess it can leave you in the dark, and that's not a good place to be.
But you're giving yourself that Sunday time to dig in.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Of course. No, my pleasure. And those of you listening or watching, hopefully you'll join us on the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.